Hello there, coaches and personal and professional development enthusiasts. Today I have a very special guest with me, Kevin Yates. And Kevin is an expert in measuring the impact of learning and development. Now, he has been in this industry for several years and he has supported fairly large companies with his knowledge. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Oh, good to see you.
Great to see you as well. So tell us a little bit more about what you do exactly.
Great question. And so, as you can see, I'm known in the industry, like in the background, as it says there, as the L&D detective. And I think it's a great analogy because if you think about like our great detectives, like Sherlock Holmes, for example, he was involved with solving mysteries, right? I solve measurement mysteries. And so my work is focused on using facts and clues and evidence and data to answer the question, what is the impact of training and learning? More specifically, I am investigating and measuring the extent to which training and learning contributes to human and business performance. So quite often when we measure training, we take a look at how many people were trained, how many courses did we program, how many hours of training and learning have people consumed. We use learning surveys to get sentiment and opinion about whether or not people like the training, whether or not they enjoyed the training, whether or not they like the instructor and all that. And those metrics are fine. They have a place. But my work as the L&D detective is very specific, right? I am looking to determine how training and learning is measurably impacting and influencing skills and behaviors and actions, and then ultimately business goals. So that's the work that I do.
That sounds really interesting. Now, with companies, what type of learning and development methodologies do they apply?
Yeah, and so, it really depends. And I love that question. And so from industry to industry, company to company, the different ways in which organizations and training and learning and talent development teams support the people they serve in those organizations, there's variance, right? It depends on, you may be in the pharmaceutical industry or the manufacturing industry or the fast food industry. And the industry in which, people find themselves in is what creates the uniqueness and the difference between how they approach training, learning, and talent development. For me, the common thread is no matter what industry, no matter the types of training and learning that you're offering, how do you measure the extent to which training and learning is fulfilling its purpose? So while there are variables, across industry, across organizations for how training and learning is offered, I think that the common thread is how do we find a way in which we can measure the extent to which training and learning impacted human and business performance? Did that answer your question? And did it make sense?
More or less. What I really wanted to know is what type of training and development methodologies are available to choose from for the companies?
Oh, so there are many different types of methods, right? And particularly if we think about modalities, right? So we can, the traditional face-to-face training, where people are brought together in a classroom, that's the historical traditional methodology. And then, add to that e-learning, right? Add to that business simulations. And now, we are even able to use things like podcasts and video-based training. There are, those different ways in which we can offer up our training and our learning solutions to people and teams and organizations we serve. So there are multiple modalities, multiple methodologies. And, just to kind of bring it back to my work, even when there are those multiple modalities, face-to-face, e-learning, business simulation, podcasts, videos, even when there are all those different types of modalities that are used to deliver training and learning to people and teams, I'm still focused on measuring how effective those different modalities are and the performance outcomes that they produce as a result of people engaging in those different learning modalities.
So, as you know, Kevin, my podcast is mainly focused on coaching. So when we talk about coaching as a development tool in an organization, how can you measure the impact of coaching specifically?
Very good question. And I love that. And so when it comes to coaching and how I approach measuring the impact of that, for me, performance is the North Star. I can't hit that home enough, right? It's performance, performance, performance. So when we think about coaching as a very viable way in which to develop people, what we want to be thinking about is the outcomes, the behavioral outcomes, the skill-based outcomes that are expected to be a result of coaching experiences and, mentoring experience, if we want to add that in. But the idea here is that when we have a clear definition for the outcomes for coaching, like how do we want to impact skills and behaviors and methodologies, and maybe to some extent even mindset as we think about coaching. So when we're clear about what those behaviors are that are the expectation for outcomes from coaching, we can then measure the extent to which those behaviors are showing up real time on the job day to day, because that's where the rubber hits the road. The best case scenario is when a coaching relationship or a coaching experience results in some type of change, if you will, in a person's behavior or methodology. And so when we are clear about what those changes are, what the expectations are, what the outcomes from coaching look like, we're then in the best possible position to measure the extent to which coaching fulfilled its purpose and did what it was intended to do.
So throughout your career, what are the biggest changes that you have observed in organizations as a result of coaching?
What I have seen is great success. And I've seen organizations be most successful when they have identified specifically and articulated what the performance outcomes are as a result of coaching. And then, in essence, they give something that people can aspire to or reach to. And then when you have the coaching that supports them in that aspiration and they're successful, we're then better able to connect the dots, if you will, between the coaching experience and the outcomes for coaching. And we can then make some pretty credible assumptions, if you will, about how effective coaching was for that particular individual.
As I understand, coaching works best in organizations where they have clear expectations and where they already have measured certain aspects they want to improve, and they come in with those measurements and they can define how they want those measurements to change. Now, when we consider these measurements, how should companies measure, let's say, behavior, for instance, is something you mentioned, or who should define these roles or these areas?
I think it is definitely up to the organization to have a clear view and idea about what it takes to be successful from a people performance perspective, right? And so coaching is included in that, right? So if we are clear about, and let's just use the example of coaching for leadership, right? And that's just very broad, but I want to use that as an example. So I think that it is up to the organization to be very transparent, very clear, very open, and very honest with communicating what those expectations are for leaders, and then connecting those expectations to coaching experiences. And then you have some direct alignment, if you will, between what your coaching experience is and what the expectations are for, again, using this example, what the expectations are for leaders in that organization. And then, again, just to take it back to what I do, that then makes it a lot easier to measure impact, because the essence of what you're chasing after when you're measuring impact is the extent to which the leaders are using those behaviors, applying those behaviors, and then how it's showing up in their performance.
Using your example of leadership coaching, can you give us 3 concrete examples of behaviors that can be measured and examples of how they could be measured?
So I don't know if I can come up with 3, but maybe I can come up with 1 or 2. So, one of the things that I can use as an example, let's say that there's an organization and they are experiencing high turnover. And one of the reasons that they're seeing for high turnover is that employees are not feeling supported in their career journeys, right? And part of that is a lack of support from their manager or their leader as they move through the career journey within their organization. So we know what the problem is. So let's say a part of that solution, not all of the solution to address that, but part of that solution is a coaching component. And there are specific behaviors that the organization needs from its managers as part of them being able to support their employees through the career journey. So let's say that one of the key behaviors for a manager is the ability to listen, right? Listen attentively and to connect with employees' goals and aspirations. Let's say that that is a behavior, maybe even call it a skill. And let's also say that there is a coaching component to that to help managers be better listeners and to engage better with their employees for the purpose of supporting them through the career journey. So listening then is the skill or the behavior, right? And so we can create some coaching opportunities to help leaders and managers be better listeners, right? The coaching from that perspective would focus on how do I support my coachee, I believe that's the word we would use, to be a better listener or to be engaged at a higher level with her or his employees in supporting them on the career journey. So that would be an example of what we can measure in terms of the extent to which that behavior is applied, right? So if a leader has a coaching experience, a coaching relationship with someone who's going to help her or him be a better listener, that leader is then practicing and applying what they've learned in that coaching relationship. That then hopefully impacts the employee who now has a better relationship with the manager from a coaching perspective. That employee now has a clear path for her or his career journey. They're feeling comfortable and good in their role and being in the business, which ultimately then means that we can impact that attrition rate, right? So the goal ultimately is to impact attrition, people who are leaving because they don't feel supported in their career. The goal also is to coach managers through how to have that type of conversation and that relationship with their employees for better coaching toward their career aspirations. And in doing that, ultimately, we can be looking at the extent to which this change with how managers are engaging with their employees is impacting the attrition rate. And hopefully the attrition rate is going to go lower because now employees are feeling better about that. So just using that as an example, my work as the L&D detective then is to make the connection between the coaching that has helped those managers do a better job at listening to their employees and engaging with their employees and connecting that dot with how it has contributed to a reduction in attrition or reduction in voluntary resignations. So that was a long example, but that's the example that comes to mind immediately.
You mentioned the listening skills specifically, and this is very interesting because listening is such an important part of coaching. Deep listening is something they encourage and cultivate in formal coaching trainings. Now, when we talk about listening skills, how would a company have an accurate measurement of how good the listening skills are of a leader, and how those listening skills have improved as a result of coaching?
You know, and that's a difficult thing to do, right? Just to be perfectly honest and transparent with you. You know, one of the things that I share about measuring the impact of training and learning is that it is difficult, but it's also possible, right? So one of the ways in which I would measure the extent to which those listening skills are improving or impacting employees the way in which we would hope is with, say, maybe a focus group or an interview of employees to get their opinion about the extent to which they see those behaviors from the manager showing up or the extent to which they believe the managers are using those skills, right? So trying to then make that correlation between how listening skills is impacting, you know, ultimately some type of KPI for human performance or business performance, that might be a little difficult to do using that example. So I think that you just have to take it further, because the follow-up question then is, if managers have improved their listening skills, how does that then impact employee performance? And then how does that impact on employee performance ultimately impact business goals? So it's a process of connecting the dots. It's a process of solving that mystery. And that is what makes that work a little difficult. But again, difficult does not mean impossible. It just means difficult. It can be done. It just means that it takes a little bit more work. And in some instances, as I said, you might not be able to make the direct correlation, but you can make the indirect correlation. Because again, if we see that employees are having a better experience with their managers because they've improved with their listening skills, then the question then is, how does that ultimately impact an employee's performance? And how does that impact on that employee's performance ultimately impact business performance or business goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's amazing. You truly are a detective, Kevin. I'm just discovering that.
Thank you.
Now, with these measurements, right? So now you understand the impact and how it all happens. We understand that the companies need to have clear expectations. They would have had to conduct some pre-measurements. Coaching certification providers teach coaches that you never coach a subject, but you coach a person. So even though coaches go into the company and they interview the stakeholders to set up the KPIs and the objectives, when you're in the session with your client, as much as the session's objective is to improve the skills, it's still about the client and about their needs. What's your experience with that?
So I that makes sense, right? I love that, because the essence of what you said is you're building this relationship with a person and not with a topic. I believe that's what you're saying here. And I think that there's kind of like an equal mix between the two. And you can't, I believe, approach one more than the other, because part of coaching is the whole humanity aspect of it all, right? Coaching is really relationship building. And in coaching, you have to build trust. You have to build transparency, I believe, honesty, all of those things. And that's the human part of it. That's the person part of it. And so that's where I believe that you are focusing on the person. Now, there are specific topics, if you will, for coaching. There's coaching for leadership, there's coaching for growth, again, different types of coaching concepts. But really, you can't have one without the other. Because if you haven't built trust into the coaching relationship, if you haven't built honesty and transparency, it's really going to be difficult, I believe, to get to that topic, right? And so in order for the coaching to work for the topic, you really have to focus on the person. So I see how the two really work together. Again, there's the humanity aspect, the connection aspect between a coach and a coachee, but then there's the topic, because without the topic, you have no reason for the coaching. And without the coaching, you have no reason for the topic. So that's, in my view, I can see where they both play very nicely together.
Wow, thank you for that insight. That was really interesting to hear from your perspective. Obviously, somebody who's on the other end of this, like literally you come in and you see how everything changed as a result and how they can measure it all. So it's nice to hear from you as well that you take this part in consideration to the human aspect of it. Now, when we talk about leadership development specifically, which type of organizations can benefit the most from leadership development?
That's an interesting question. And my honest answer to that is I don't know that any one particular type of organization can benefit more from leadership coaching than the other, right? Leadership is very necessary across organizations, across industries. Leadership is what what inspires people, right? Leadership is what motivates people. Leadership is what helps organizations win. So I don't see where there is more of a need for leadership in one industry or business than the other. There might be different types of leadership behaviors, depending upon the organization that you're in or the industry that you're in. But I don't believe that there is one particular industry that, needs or requires leadership coaching or development or training more than the other. I think that what will be different, again, from industry to industry, company to company, are the specific leadership skills and behaviors that are required for success in that particular industry or that particular company.
And in your experience, in which type of companies have you seen the greatest positive impact as a result of coaching?
Yeah. And the good news for me relative to that question is that I have worked in many different industries and worked with many different companies, right? And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but even with the different industries in which I've worked, the different companies in which I've worked, I've not seen one particular business or one particular industry that does a better job at it than the other. I've seen mixed. I've seen it mixed, right? I've seen some organizations do better than others, some not do as well as others. I guess what I'm saying is that I've not seen an instance where there is one particular industry or one particular company that is just really doing it so much better than other industries or other companies or other businesses. I've just seen different pockets of success, varying success, and on a lot of levels. It's not fair to compare apples to oranges. You have to compare oranges to oranges. So that being the case, again, my experience tells me that there is just varying success across industries and across companies with how they are having success with coaching and leadership experiences. So that might not have been the answer you were expecting, but again, I really honestly cannot say that I've seen one industry need it more than the other, or one industry do it better than the other. I've just seen varying levels of success.
So you work a lot with HR directors and obviously learning and development departments. Out of curiosity, which type of learning methodology do employees enjoy the most? Like training, mentoring, coaching? Is there like a clear favorite what the employees like the most?
No, I can't say that I've seen employees like one particular modality the most. But what I have seen is that employees like to have a variety of ways in which they can learn, grow, and develop, right? So a classroom experience can be supplemented with an e-learning experience. So you have a classroom experience, which is the face-to-face, and then you have an e-learning experience that kind of supports whatever that classroom experience was. And then you add a coaching component to that, right? So there was the classroom training experience, there was the e-learning experience that supports the classroom experience, and then there's the coaching that supports the e-learning experience and the classroom experience. So what I have seen is that employees appreciate when there is a variety of ways in which they can learn, grow, and develop. And most important, when that particular topic is kind of like the common thread, but for that common thread, there are multiple ways in which they can engage. So they engage through classroom, they engage through e-learning, they engage through coaching and mentoring. So another long answer to your question, but the short answer is that what I have seen is that employees are most appreciative when there are multiple ways in which they can engage, learn, grow, and develop.
Variety is key. Wow, interesting to know that's a general perception. That's new to me. What's your definition of coaching?
Wow, what's my definition of coaching? I'm going to take a few seconds to think about that. So, when I think about coaching, I believe that it is an experience where there's an opportunity. I'll use myself as an example. When I think about coaching and what that means for me and what that looks like for me, coaching is when there's an opportunity for me to engage in a relationship or relationships, because I don't believe it has to be just one coach. So for me, when I think about coaching and what that is and what that looks like, it's an opportunity for me to have dialogue with people or a person with whom I trust, who can give me honest feedback about where they see me doing well and where they see there's an opportunity for me to do something different. And I am most receptive to that type of feedback when we've done the things that I talked about earlier, when we've built that relationship of trust, when there is transparency, when there is honesty. So when I think about what coaching means for me and what it does for me, coaching just really allows me to be the best that I can be. And I can be the best I can be when I have clear external feedback about what I'm doing well, what's working for me, what is helping me be the best I can be, but also when I hear about the different blockers, if you will, that might be preventing me from being the best that I can be, where there's opportunity for me to shift, my thinking or the ways in which I work or, how I'm behaving, acting, or performing. So it's a good mix. It's a good mix of here's what's working, here's where there's an opportunity to do something different, and getting that external feedback through a coaching relationship that really helps me be the best that I can be.
I absolutely love that. That's really interesting insight. I never heard that from anybody else, but it's so true. Wow. That what you're blindsided to is what gets you. Like what you don't know what you don't know, right? And usually those are the things that get you.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're blindsided and if you don't see it and if nobody brings this to your attention, you can't improve on those things. You can't, and then you just keep going, banging your head in the wall, and you don't understand why breaking through. And
Yeah,
it's so
absolutely.
true. It was a great analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about what type of clients do you typically work with, Kevin?
I am fortunate to work with a variety of clients, right? So I work with clients in the pharmaceutical industry. I work with clients in the travel industry. I've worked, I've done actual work in the social media space. So my clients are a variety, which is good. I like that. And it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. No matter the client, no matter the industry, no matter the organization, the common thread is how do we measure the impact of our training and learning on human and business performance? And so while I've had a variety of clients, including the ones that I just described, the common denominator amongst all those different types of clients with whom I work is they are looking at ways in which to credibly measure fulfillment of purpose for their training and learning solutions. So my client base is pretty wide and broad, and I like that because it then creates variety for me.
That's great. That's great. And in terms of the size of the companies that you work with, is there like a criteria?
No, I have no criteria for the size of an organization. If there is a training and learning team that exists in that organization, and if that organization is 100 people, 50 people, or 10,000 or 50,000, then I'm there to do the work, right? So the organization size is really inconsequential. My work is just really focused on answering the question, what is the impact of training and learning?
Do you also get involved with developing training and learning programs?
Well, to the extent where I am able to support instructional design teams with impact-based instructional design methodologies, no, that's where I kind of go outside a little bit of that narrow focus that I talked about in terms of measuring impact, but it's still directly related because I do have a methodology where you can design training and learning that is intentionally created for specific types of performance outcomes that are measurable. So while it's a little bit outside of my scope, there is a connection, right? Because if you design for impact, then it's going to be a lot easier to measure impact. If you have intentional specificity with how you are creating and designing training and learning experiences that are created to produce specific types of performance outcomes that are measurable, then that's where I kick in, and that's the space in which I work. So I do a little bit of support with impact-based instructional design, but I'm mostly focused on the analytics part that actually collects the data and analyzes the data to show how training and learning is impacting human and business performance.
Right, right. And that makes perfect sense because you have so much experience in seeing what actually delivers results in specific areas that you might as well leverage that knowledge and help companies implement the best solution for specific outcomes. So it makes perfect sense. Now, can you share a success story that you had with some of your clients and how they transformed their learning and development department as a result?
Yeah, one of the success stories I can share with you was some work I did with a sales team. There were some specific skills and behaviors that the organization identified as critical for sales success, right? And so what we were able to do is make connections between how the customers were reporting and sharing their experience with those salespeople relative to how those salespeople were showing up, right? And by show up, I mean the skills and behaviors that they were using in their engagements with clients. We were able to connect the dots between the skills and behaviors that they learned as a result of their training and learning experience, how those skills and behaviors were showing up with clients, looking at the data that was used to measure client perception and client experience with those salespeople. So it was kind of like, going from the training and learning experience to the person, to the salesperson, to the skills that were a part of that training and learning, to the extent to which those skills were showing up in client engagements, and then clients then providing that feedback downstream to say, here are the skills and behaviors that we're seeing in our salespeople, and connecting that back into the training and learning experience. So we're able to make some pretty credible correlations between the training and the learning that was designed to produce specific skills and behaviors, and how that then showed up when applied with client engagements. That was a very successful experience because we were able to use client data as evidence for the extent to which sales professionals were meeting performance expectations based on the training and learning that they received. Now, I also want to be clear in saying that training and learning is not the only thing that contributes to performance. It is part of what contributes to performance. So even in that measurement and even in that success, we had to take a look at all that there is that contributes to employee performance. But that would be an example of where we had credible, reliable data that connected the dots between training and learning and performance outcomes.
That sounds like a really interesting project that you work on with this sales team, and I'm sure the results were fantastic. Now, if a company wants to improve their learning and development structure, what are your top 5 tips for any company that wants to make a high impact learning and development program?
So I think the first thing, the most critical thing is that performance is the North Star. So I think that you have to be intentionally and purposefully and diligently focused on people's performance and business performance, right? I think that the second thing that organizations need to be thinking about is the extent to which they can and cannot measure impact. And that's probably going to surprise a lot of people to hear me say, because the reality is that there are times where you can measure the impact of training, and then there may be some times just because of the complexities that you cannot. So, my second recommendation is just to be clear and be honest and tell the truth about what you can and cannot measure. The third recommendation that I have, kind of going back to that first point, being focused on performance. So the third thing is, rather than have a training needs analysis, I recommend a performance needs analysis. Because the training needs analysis often focuses on when do we need to have the training, how many people do we need to train, what are we going to have for lunch at the training, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas a performance needs analysis is intentionally focused on what are the business challenges or successes or opportunities, what are the performance expectations to address those business challenges or business problems, right? What are the threats to performance? So again, what I'm getting at here is, my third recommendation is to just change the discussion from tactical to strategic. And that means have a discussion that is focused on performance, right? My fourth recommendation then is to be kind to our business partners and our stakeholders and ourselves. Here's what I mean by that. Historically, we have been focused on the training, the program, the course. And we have had what I'll call an order taker relationship with our business partners and our stakeholders. So historically, our business partners and our stakeholders come to us and they say something like, we'd like one instructor led, 2 e-learnings, and a side order of virtual learning to go, right? That's how they're used to engaging with us. And we're used to engaging that way. Well, when we try to shift that conversation to a performance-based discussion, it could be hard. It could be difficult for our business partners, our stakeholders, and ourselves because we aren't used to having that kind of conversation. So, my fourth recommendation here is to just be kind and empathetic to ourselves as we try to shift the discussion and change the discussion. Let's not beat ourselves up if it doesn't happen immediately. Let's give ourselves a little bit of grace to know that while we want to change the way we engage, it might not happen immediately, but let's just keep trying. And when it doesn't happen, keep trying. And in the process, give yourself kindness and grace, and just know that it may work sometimes, and that it may not. And then my fourth recommendation, which is really kind of a new one for me, is to leverage artificial intelligence with impact analytics. We can work smarter, not harder, right? AI, artificial intelligence, can help with some of that work that we do to identify trends, to identify, some variance in data patterns and all that, particularly as we talk about measuring how training and learning has impacted a business KPI or a human performance KPI. So again, and I wasn't able to say this, 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, but, my fifth recommendation is to leverage artificial intelligence to work smarter, not harder, with the impact analytics work and the work that we're doing to measure the impact of training. and learning on human and business performance. So those are my 5 recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Kevin. Now, if somebody wants to work with you, where can they find you?
Oh my goodness, I'm all over the place, man. So definitely go to my website. That's kevinmyates.com. kevinmyates.com. Definitely visit my website if you want to contact me. But I also recommend that you follow me on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and X, formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, I saw you're huge on X, so definitely we'll put all the links in the description below so people can find you. And thanks again for sharing all your insight and all your knowledge about measuring the impact of learning and development.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Now, to our listeners, if you enjoyed my conversation with Kevin, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us for more content about personal, professional development and about coaching. Thank you. Bye-bye.